Alright folks, listen up. We finally have the Inazuma Chronicled Banner incoming, and naturally the big question is whether or not you should get the illustrious Yae Miko the Wise and Beautiful, the Queen of Sass, who of course guards the Grand Narukami Shrine. There are reasons why Yae Miko is probably the only one that actually matters with this upcoming Chronicled Banner. Okay, fine, that's a bit of a lie. All the 5 stars from the Inazuma Chronicled Banner are actually still perfectly fine, with the possible exception of Kazuha, who is both slightly better than and slightly worse than fine, mainly because, you know, Xilonen exists. But there's also Ayaka, who is probably going to be getting either side-graded or potentially slightly power-crept by Skirk when she comes out. We'll just have to see. But as someone who has been a loud and proud Yae Miko simp, yes, that's exactly what I am, today I want to update us on what it's like to play with her right here, right now, Emerge. But before we get into this, don't forget to subscribe. I am going to get Skirk, by the way, even though I don't have a Escoffier, and I still don't feel like getting a Escoffier personally, so there will be some videos about how she plays, especially without the overall meta team. So be sure to ring the bell icon so you can be notified of the latest videos and of course live streams on this channel. Now, I think it would be remiss of me not to remind everyone as well how to play Yae Miko, just so that everyone is aware, because there may still be some players out there who still complain that she's a little bit clunky or takes too long to be on field or some other crazy nonsense like that. Remember, start with a skill 3 times, you get all 3 turrets out, then set up the rest of her team, then drop her ult, then use her skill again 3 times to drop new turrets, and then continue with the rest of your team's DPS. Essentially, never, ever, ever run EEEQEEE, okay? Now, that being said, let me say this. If you are at the stage where you want to use Miko's ult, it's actually not a bad idea to drop a skill again, i.e. drop a fresh new turret, into your ult. This way you can ensure that you always have 3 turrets active while you use your ult. That way you have maximum ult damage and then you just drop 3 turrets again. So you can do that as a way of being absolutely sure, but if you know for a fact that you had only dropped your turrets out not too long ago, then yeah, you don't need to do that at all, of course. Alright, without further ado, let's get into it.
Try not to enjoy this too much.
My blade is all that remains.
Right now. You're in for a little shock.
Oh no, I'm gonna ruin my gloves. Suntown is only the beginning.
Sight to behold. Emerge right now.
Miko's last rerun was in the second half of version 4.4 after Shen Yun's release, so it's actually been more than a year since we've seen her banner around. Thankfully, we have actually seen her released in the story since then in limited time events, so it's not like Hoyo has completely forgotten her existence, unlike some characters. Now, let's just quickly go through the new characters who are either like playing with Miko or they're just straight up Miko buffs. So we'll start off with Chiori, who can totally play in some Geo Electro teams where raw damage is kind of all that matters. And Chiori Miko can still pump out some pretty decent amount of damage. Either that or you could potentially play them both in the Raiden Inquisition, so there we go. Arlecchino and Mavuika are also new characters where I like to use them with Miko in my favorite Chevy Overload teams. So all my favorite Chevy Overload teams prefer to have Miko, that's just my personal preference. So that includes Fathers, Mavuikas, there we go. I find that Miko is a little bit better than Fischl, mainly because it's hard to maintain an Electro aura in these Overload teams when you're playing with conventional rotations, but it's not impossible, so you can sort of make it happen, and if you do, then I suppose it's possible that Fischl might be ever so slightly better than Miko in this regard. Either way, Arlecchino can still trigger C6 Fischl, that's pretty good, but Mavuika, if you're actually spinning to win, it's not going to be triggering that either, so at that point, I think if you're playing with Mavuika, you might want to lean towards Miko instead. Now, the next characters that showed up include someone like Clorinde. I have played Clorinde aggravate teams with Miko, but I actually tend to prefer Fischl in these teams, mainly because I'm doing a lot of normal attacks with Clorinde. I find that Fischl is just a little bit better in this regard. But that being said, though, if you don't like Fischl for whatever reason, you can absolutely play Miko instead. She's fine. And you'll be still doing a pretty similar amount of damage, just not as much. Now, the next character I want to talk about real quick is Sigewinne. Sigewinne can be played in some Miko teams, and the main benefit you get from Sigewinne is that she does actually buff up to 10 of Miko's turret hits. So, there we go. Next we have Kachina, and basically if you need a scroll buff but you don't have Xilonen, then you always have Kachina. Next, we're talking about Emily and Kinich. Burn load is a thing that can exist in the game, and in fact, this might be something you want to look at in this current Spiral Limits against that goddamn lava dragon if you are really bad at doing burn damage, because I think everyone is, but you have Miko and you want to do some additional damage just to try and top it off. Yeah, there's your idea right there. Next, we're going to have Xilonen. Now, of course, Xilonen, being one of the most versatile characters in the game, is a very strong addition to a lot of Miko's teams. Furthermore, as someone who actually has C2 Xilonen, let me just say, if you have C2 Xilonen and C1 Miko, getting Miko's ult back kind of feels trivial. So that's actually particularly hilarious right there. Next, we're going to have Chaska, where Miko is a perfectly valid off-field choice for Chaska. You may want to prefer Fischl, though, because you might be able to do a lot of reactions and get that A4 passive out. Besides that, though, considering that Chaska is doing charge attacks for the most part as opposed to normal attacks, yeah, it's the C6 part of C6 Fischl is going to be not that useful. There's a good defense chance that Miko is actually slightly better in this regard. Next, we're going to talk about Autoron and Aoife. Both these characters prefer to be played in taser teams, and so, you know, Miko can be a part of that. Great. Now we have Lanyan and Mizuki. Basically, if you need a defensive option and VV, there's your choice right there, although Jean already exists, so, you know, you have some options. On top of that, Shenyun also exists, just in case you want to play Plunge Miko, which we'll talk about a little bit later. And then we have Iansan, who of course is really, really good with Miko. Now, Miko is actually also a kind of particularly synergistic choice with Iansan as well, because when you go right here, right now, emerge, the use of your skill tends to move you around unless you're like right next to an enemy or right next to a wall, in which case, of course, you don't move. Moving around does, of course, maintain Iansan's Night Soul meter, preferably above that 42 Night Soul mark, which means you can actually use Miko as a way of sort of keeping Iansan's meter up compared to other supports in the game. Now, that being said, though, if you have Iansan C4, then you could potentially also, of course, use Miko's ult in order to then go right here, right now, and merge, and that could actually be a pretty big boon to the amount of Night Soul that Iansan has produced as a direct result of Miko's movement and actions. Depending on the rest of the team, though, I probably would still stick with C6 Sara over C6 Iansan, mainly because C6 Sara is a better Electro buffer than Iansan is. Hey guys, this is Kate the editor. I may have made a bit of a mistake here because it seems like somehow C6 Symphonist Iansan is actually power creeping C6 Sky Harp Sara, and I've tested this for both Miko's DPS and A's DPS. I'll have to do a full video on it later on, but I think suffice to say the difference not being that huge may mean that Sara's overall DPS might be the thing that makes Sara still a better pick. But in teams like, for example, Overload, there is a pretty good idea to actually use Iansan instead of Sara, because you're probably then hyper buffing, let's say, your Arlecchino in that regard. And finally, we have Veressa. And here's the thing, I don't play Veressa with Miko at all. But I suppose if you don't have Shenyun for whatever reason, but you still want to play a pretty solid looking Veressa team, you could always go triple Electro with Iansan and just go for broke like that, and then, you know, chuck in Xilonen and you should be a-okay. Oh yeah, by the way, also in version 5.2, reactions got buffed. Now, of course, one of the big ones is, of course, Superconduct, where it does twice the damage, but it's still not much. The other reactions also got buffed by a little bit, but I don't feel like it's enough to like really justify going, I don't know, full EM on an Electro character or a Pyro character specifically for those reactions. Either way, though, the way I've built Miko does actually get a little bit buffed because of that. all of this to say, whenever there's a new character that shows up in the game, even now, there's still a pretty good to fair chance that you can actually play them with Yae Miko. Whether Miko is the best choice for that character is always going to be up in the air. The official heads will generally vigorously argue against that. But the reality is, for the Miko enjoyers out there, there's still, she's still a very strong, very relevant character in a variety of teams.
Right now, emerge.
You asked for it! Final warning! On my hook!
Nothing lasts forever. Right here, emerge. Right here.
Wanted my full attention, did you? Everlasting as the moon! Lay bare!
Emerge. Right now. Right here.
Hands where I can see 'em!
Quick as a flash. Start them.
Stop right there!
Speaking of teams, there's 4 teams in particular that I tend to play Miko in, so let's just quickly go through them. The first one, of course, is going to be International. This is a team that is a very powerful aggravate team, and it has, of course, some of my more favorite characters like the wonderful Lisa, or, of course, the incredible Nahida. And now that I have C2 Xilonen, this team is, of course, a lot more fun than ever before. Of course, you don't need C2 Xilonen in order to make this team strong. Xilonen by herself is already plenty enough to make this team as powerful as it can be. The next team, of course, is going to be the Raiden Inquisition. So long as I'm fighting something that isn't Omega Cringe against Electro, I feel like this team pretty much withstands the test of time. Of course, it does help that I've massively invested into it with Constellations and the like, but if you decide to get C2 Xilonen like I have, there is actually a rotation that you can play with this team that's almost too sweatlordy, if you will, but it's definitely a lot more of a faster rotation compared to what we're normally able to do with a team like this. I mean, here's the thing, it's so sweatlord that I can't even describe it myself. Next, we've also got some spread hypercarry teams, mainly with Dignari or Quick Bloom Alhaitham. Of course, I do find that Miko's turrets actually trigger Hyper Bloom seeds pretty well for the most part. Obviously, not as well as Shinobu, but either way, I'm still able to get most of my Hyper Bloom seeds out in a team like this, so it does seem to work pretty well, especially with Alhaitham. And then finally, of course, we have the Overload teams. Like I mentioned before, Overload teams with Mavuika or Arlecchino, or hell, even the higher for that matter, tend to end up being pretty good in my opinion, especially with Arlecchino. Of course, I tend to prefer to play Overload Clorinde at that point if I'm playing with someone who can be an off-fielder like Mavuika or the higher. That is, of course, just my personal preference. Either way, though, I'm sure there's going to be a lot of Quick Bloom Miko mains out there who are having an absolutely grand old time playing with Miko as an on-fielder as opposed to what I normally do, which is play her more as an off-fielder. Supposedly, that's supposed to be her meta, I guess? I don't know. Either way, though, I do want to briefly also reiterate my perspective on the Miko and Fischl debate. I am still of the opinion that Miko is slightly stronger than Fischl in quite a fair few teams, and that's specifically because with Miko, her kit will work pretty much no matter what, whereas with Fischl's A4 doesn't usually work in spread and overload teams, and C6 Fischl won't really work unless you're using someone who does do normal attacks. So for example, if you're playing with someone like Tignari or you're playing with Mavuika, for example, yeah, the C6 part of C6 Fischl usually doesn't work. The duration increase is pretty nice though, so there's that. But also Fischl's ult doesn't do any real damage, whereas Miko's ult, as we probably have seen in some of the video already, does an absolute crap ton of damage. No doubt in aggravate teams with someone like Senno or Clorinde, for example, Fischl will be stronger anyway because these characters can make her have full use of her A4 passive, which is particularly good. But in other teams that I've outlined where her parts of her kits don't necessarily work as much, it seems to me like Miko does in fact pull through. I think the real difference maker really is going to be Miko's ult because it just does a lot of damage. I have Constellations on Miko, but I don't have enough Constellations to actually upgrade her ult. So basically you're seeing the full power of a crowned ult Miko, and yeah, it does a lot of damage. And so as long as you have those 3 turrets on the field before popping it, yeah, you're doing maximum power. This kind of makes Miko a lot more trickier to play potentially than Fischl, in the sense that you do want to make sure that you're popping that ult when you have 3 turrets on the field, but I feel like as long as you're using Miko's ult regularly, which is what we call in the industry playing the character's kit, it seems like Miko is in fact a little bit stronger than Fischl. But of course, the main thing is that Miko is a lot hotter than Fischl. I think that is pretty much indisputable.
Okay, right now, right here.
And Shroud.
Seems like an emergency. A bit of help.
Share my knowledge. I see everything. Right now, right here, right now.
Keep up. Can't see? Yeah. Let's nip that in the bud.
Has anything changed with Miko's builds? Possibly. Really depends on who you ask. So let's start off with weapons. For most Miko players out there, the options remain mostly unchanged. Kagura's remains her best in slots, Sunny Morning Sleeper is fine, but I guess if you're going to use a weapon like that, you may prefer the Jug instead. And then of course there's Vivid Notions. Now, we need to address the plunge Miko players out there, specifically because Vivid Notions is actually a really, really strong weapon. I'm not just 100% sure if you'll end up with more DPS running this over Kagura's though, because you could potentially get more damage out of your turrets anyway, and you can still enjoy some plunge gameplay. But either way though, Vivid Notions does work really, really well on Miko because you get stacks by using your skill, not just your skill hitting anything. So the idea is to actually not start off with all of your turrets. You're gonna have to have a bit of a different kind of gameplay experience. Basically, you want to be weaving skills in with your plunges. So as after you plunge, +1 turret. After you plunge, +1 turret. So that's the idea. Now here's the thing though, your first 3, if not your first 4, if not potentially your first 5 plunges, can still do maximum damage thanks to this weapon, but afterwards there's going to be a bit of a desync between your skill cooldown and your plunges. So at that point, some of your plunges might actually have less damage coming from the weapon. Of course, this all changes if your ult is ready, in which case you just keep doing what you're doing until that desync kicks in, and then just pop your ult and you can start again. By the time the second desync comes in, your Shen Yun buff should have run out by then, so you're going to have to sort out that problem instead. While I have the plunge Miko players' attention, real quick, Long Night's Oath should also be your best in slot artifact set. The only issue that I see with this is that you're probably not going to be charge attacking with Miko all that much, mainly because Miko's charge attack does have quite a long animation. Now for the rest of us, our 4-star options haven't changed that much either. It's mainly Witsith, Hakushin, Oath to One Eye, maybe Solar Pearl even. And for artifacts, aside from the plunge players, nothing has changed all that much either. You can still choose to run Golden Trooper if you have absolutely no intention of using Miko's ult whatsoever. Apparently high Constellation Mikos tend to have this mindset. That being said though, I also sometimes forget to use Miko's ult as well. Otherwise, 2B2B's Electro attack is the way to go. That's what I'm using as well. KQM reckons there are people who run EOSF, which I think is a little bit overkill, but it's an option. Otherwise, Gilded Dreams rather is also a perfectly fine choice. Now for artifact stats, Electro Cups and Crit Hats is usually the way to go. The bigger contention has always been which sand you use. Overall, attack sands should do a bit more damage. That is basically what the calcs and sheets are all showing us. But I kind of feel like that EM sands is at least close enough to be relevant. And on top of that, you potentially could get a bit of a leg up in Quick Bloom teams, for example. So I guess the best way to maybe think about this is, if you love using Miko's ult, yeah, attack sands is pretty much the way to go. If you're a quick bloomer, or you're mainly interested in using her turrets, maybe consider it EM sands, especially if you're playing with a lot of attack buffers like Kujo Sara or Iansan. Either way though, I reckon if you want to play Miko, and you really want to play Miko, consider farming one of each, just so that you can test them out and maybe play around with your build depending on what you want to do. And finally, let's just quickly go through Miko's Constellations. As always, you do not need any of Miko's Constellations. Miko's gameplay experience, especially in the 4 teams that I mentioned, is already pretty smooth, even at C0, so long as you don't get bogged down playing, EEEQ. Whenever there's a Miko rerun though, I of course will go for +1 Miko Constellation. This time is no different, until of course I have C6, so who the hell knows when that's going to happen. Currently I am at C3, so, we'll just have to see what happens. Now, I feel like, because I am a little bit too acclimated to having Constellations on Miko, I'm not 100% sure if Miko's DPS these days is quote-unquote enough for most people, considering the various developments in things like Spiral Abyss in lieu of recent character releases like Mavuika and Escoffier. So feel free to let me know how you feel about that in the comments below. But at least my C3 Miko is definitely enough damage, and you'd better hope so when you get Constellations on event characters. But thanks to this, I do have some first-hand experience with some of these Constellations, so I could offer at least a bit of that perspective. C1 actually has been very, very useful. It's plus 24 out of the 90 energy refunded, which is a little more than a quarter of her ult, as long as you have all 3 turrets out. This, of course, lends even more emphasis to making sure you have all 3 turrets out when you use her ult. You pair this up with something like C2 Xilonen's Electro buff, and maybe even Electro Resonance in a team like International, for example, suddenly her ult actually comes back about as quickly as the cooldown expires. And on top of that, because we're playing with C2 Xilonen, the cooldown expires even faster, so that's really, really nice. C2, of course, has 2 majorly useful things, mainly the turret range increase, and then, of course, the extra damage. Extra damage is extra damage, we always like that, but the main thing is, of course, that range. It's pretty hard to stuff up your turret placement when you're using C2 Miko. So long as you put your turrets, let's say, in the middle of Spiral Abyss, 95% of the time, they'll be hitting whatever shows up, no matter where it goes. Even if enemies start running around all over the place, it's pretty much GG's for them. The turret is going to be smacking them in the head. Now, C3 is skill levels, C5 is ult levels. Both of them are, of course, pretty nice because that's where the majority of Miko's damage comes from. Now, that is the extent of my first-hand experience insofar that I have C3 Miko. C4, of course, is going to be pretty nice in aggravate teams like International. Of course, 5-star C4s are, I think, famously not all that great compared to 4-star C4s like Iansan's. Ooh, suddenly a lot easier to play C4. So yeah, don't expect a whole lot whenever you're getting anyone's C4, I think, at this point. Even Mavuika's C4, I think, is not even that hot. And then finally, of course, we have C6 Miko's turrets that just simply ignore a whole lot of defense, which of course is actually something that I kind of unironically have a bit of first-hand experience in because I have C2 Raiden Shogun. It's essentially the same idea. So what tends to happen is with A, what I've noticed is that my initial slash, and therefore I think my overall damage with A, pretty much doubles with C2. So I would probably say that Miko's turret damage with C6 pretty much doubles. I don't know. Either way, though, I also have a little bit of experience in something similar to this, in that when I'm playing with International, I have Lisa and C2 Nahida, which means enemies typically have minus 45% defense as opposed to Miko's turrets ignoring 60% defense. So yeah, I'm already sort of closer to that. So that's pretty nice. So long as you have put some effort into your build, the reality is you don't need any of Miko's Constellations. She is already absolutely perfectly fine at C0. But I think maybe C1 is probably the Constellation that may be worth looking into if you want to use her ult a lot more, because of course her ult is in fact quite a lot of damage.
Let's put up a good fight.
Shine down. All right.
Strike! Storm the front!
A sight to behold.
Inazuma shines its...
I guess I never answered that question, so let's get into it. It's now 2025. We are in the age of the Mavuikas of the world. In this context, should you get Yae Miko? You bet your ass you should. If you don't like Yae Miko for some reason, how? First off. Secondly, okay, fine, don't get her. She's definitely not some ultra meta character. Some people would argue she never was. But if you like her characterization, if you think she's really attractive, if your name is Katagari-Yami, oh, those are reasons enough to, I think, get her. And if your name is Katagari-Yami, maybe even consider her Constellations. She's still pretty strong, just not the strongest per se. But she does seem to be rather future-proof regardless for someone like me who actually really, really likes the illustrious Yae Miko, the wise and beautiful. Let me know what you think about all of this in the comments below. How do you feel about Yae Miko these days? Do you still play her, perhaps? Let me know in the comments. I will continue to play her. No doubt about that. Especially in Overload, especially in International, especially in Quick Bloom teams. 100%. 100%. Alright, anyway, hope you guys enjoyed. If you like this video, hit that like button, subscribe for more Genshin Impact action. Until next time, I'll see you guys later. Thanks for watching. Bye.
Right here. Now.
Hands where I can see 'em.
Control breathing.
Start them.
Sight to behold. Right now.
Wrath from the sky.
Bow to the abyss, or be destroyed!
Incinerate. Ready.
Loyal to the wrong master.
Let's move.
Emerge.
Light of the blazing sun. Incinerate.
But